Hey, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Sarah Sperber and I'm a realtor in the Northern Nevada housing market. And on today's video, I thought it would be really fun to talk about whether or not Reno, Nevada is still affordable. I can already hear all the grumbling and rumbling of the locals who were born and raised here, so don't worry, I'm gonna unpack this. I'm gonna try to make it as unbiased as possible. While I did not grow up here, I have lived here for way too long. I've lived here for a really long time. I've been here since 2010 is when I moved to the area, so almost 15 years since I moved out here. So I feel like, even though I'm not a local, I was in Reno before it was cool. So anyway, I'm gonna dive on in, so stay with me. And if you have anything to add, I would love to see your comments below. I take pride in the fact that I respond to every single comment, so don't hold back. We can't really talk about Reno and affordability without the elephant in the room, which is the housing market, and I'm a realtor, so obviously that is a key point of interest for me. Our city has rapidly expanded in the last 10, but really the last 5 years have been crazy. This city is growing and it's still on the upswing. I mean, we are in a huge period of economic development and growth, so I don't see that stopping anytime soon. This has had a major impact on the housing market. I also am of the opinion that COVID really impacted our housing market. It did that in a lot of places, but because we're so close to Tahoe and because we're a straight shot on Highway 80 from the Bay Area, I think a lot of people who work in tech and work in the Bay Area who are living there realized that working remote was actually fine, and it's become like a full-time option for a lot of people. So I think a lot of people are liking living in Reno / Tahoe and still making that Bay Area cheddar. So I think that is also driving up prices. If you follow me or you've been following me for a while, you know that I give housing market updates for our market every single month. And the most recent data showed that our median sales price for single family homes in our market landed at $589,000. So that's not cheap. I will tell you, the first home that I ever purchased in this city back in 2012 was under $200,000, and that same home is worth well over that now. So I mean, that has been a huge part of the conversation here when it comes to affordability and the cost of living, but just keep that in your head that the median sales price is higher than average for cities of this same size. We've also been battling a severe inventory crisis in our market. I know this is common and this is an issue in a lot of other cities and places, but we have far less homes for sale than we have people who need to buy them. So that's also driving up prices overall. Even with the high mortgage rates, that has been a factor in our market. That's not something we can really leave out of this conversation. Let's talk about the general rule for affordability before we get into whether or not Reno is affordable, right? The general rule of thumb for affordability is that your overall housing cost should not exceed 30% of your household income. So why 30% and where did that come from? Based on my research here, that originated from the US government housing policies in the 1960s. They basically conducted a study and determined that any household that was spending over 30% of their total income on housing was facing a significant cost burden. For example, if a household earns $5,000 per month in income, their housing expenses should not exceed $1,500 per month. Just to give you a rough example. So what I'm getting at is that all of this begs the question of, can the average consumer in Reno actually afford housing here? Now, as I mentioned, our median sales price in Reno this past month landed at $589,000. Let's just call it $600,000 for ease of numbers. This is a huge increase from what people were used to prior to this kind of tech boom that's here. Now, I get it. Prices have gone up everywhere nationwide, but I feel like here in Reno, it's been a bit more drastic than in cities of similar size. So let's just say that a typical down payment, now of course it depends on your loan product. I am not a lender, don't come at me for this, but let's just call a down payment for this 10%. So with a down payment of 10% on a $600,000 house, on average, your household income is going to need to be around $122,000 a year. So here's where it gets interesting, you guys, is that more than a quarter of Reno's population and workforce, these folks are gonna have a really hard time paying the mortgage on a median priced home, even if they can save up that much for a down payment. This mismatch between wages and home prices is really exacerbating the affordability crisis, particularly in this market. So, to answer the question of this whole video, the answer is that the average household income in Reno is well below the amount needed to comfortably purchase a median priced home in our market. Now, the key for some of you folks out there is going to be putting together a strategy, and sometimes that could take years. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but if you put together a game plan and you have your strategy in place, that is probably the most valuable thing you can do if your goal is to own a home. All right, if you guys have any questions about the Reno Sparks housing market, the Northern Nevada lifestyle, anything I've talked about here, market data, all of that, I would love to be a resource for you. You can book a free call with me. There's a link to do that in the show notes below. It's non-obligatory, just a chance to connect and see if we might be a good fit to work together, or at the very least, just get your questions answered about real estate. And if you haven't already, make sure you hit that like and that subscribe button. I put out new videos every single week about the Northern Nevada lifestyle, the Reno Sparks housing market, and of course, all things to do with buying and selling real estate. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you guys next week.